Fielden, who's Head of Transportation for the Council. On his right is Richard Lewis, who's the Head of Development Management in the Planning Service for the Council. On my right is Rachel Beale, who's Clerk to the Committee, and on her right is Tim James, who's the Assistant Chief Legal Officer. On his right, over there, is Polly Ellis, who's a solicitor with the Council. Over there, at the dais, is Norman Jones, who's a team leader within the Planning Department. Behind him, for some of you, is Geraint Thomas, who's operating the machinery relating to the webcast. At my front here are Scott Jenkins, Helen Smith, Adrian Wilcock and Steve Williams, who are all members of staff in the Planning Department, and members of the Council are the ones in these seats here. A number of you will also be known to us in due course, because a number of you have asked to speak in relation to item 9. And in view of that, I've decided that item 9 should be early on in this meeting to enable that item of business to be dealt with. For those of you who then wish to leave, and then we will deal after a short adjournment with the other business. In terms of the business, please note that you are being webcast, and by remaining in this room, you are agreeing that anything you say might be recorded, and any action you take could also be visually recorded. So there is no need, therefore, for anybody to take photos or videos of our proceedings, because they are available on the Council website. I have had no requests for any part of the meeting to be addressed in Welsh, and therefore we will be dealing with the business in English only. I would ask that in the event of the fire alarm going, that you pay attention to the green signs which indicate the exits, because there is no planned fire drill, and therefore if it does go, it is potentially a real emergency. And I think that's probably it, apart from the obvious one, I suppose, for most of us in the main chamber, in as much as we're involved now in a political process, an election process, that has nothing to do with the proceedings taking place in this committee today. We will not indulge in any party political activity at all, and we would ask that speakers also do not indulge in any party political discussions, because they are matters for the doorstep and not for in this committee, which is strictly non-political. I'm aware that there is at least a representative of Blaenau Gwent County Borough Council present, and possibly someone from Caerphilly County Borough Council. They are sort of equal partners, I suppose, to Torfaen Council in relation to the planning application for item number 9 to Pentus. And welcome to see how it's done in Torfaen, Hedley. Thank you. I think that's probably it, apart from asking Tim if you can start dealing with declarations of interest, please, and we'll also deal with apologies, please, Rachel. Perhaps apologies first, please, Rachel.
Yes, we have apologies from Councillors Nigel Davis and Alan Fazer.
Are there any other apologies? Councillor Seaborn.
Councillor Len Constance.
Thank you. I think that's probably it, isn't it? So, fine. And declarations of interest, please, Tim.
Yes. Yes, thank you, Chair. Members, can I remind you that in relation to any declarations, they're to be not only declared orally now, which I'll take you through, but also to be recorded in the attendance register, which is passing around the chamber. Firstly, Councillor Parish, I believe that you wish to declare personal but non-prejudicial interest in relation to 4 of the items on the agenda, namely number 9 to Pentwys, number 10 Uskvale, number 11 Garndyffordd, and number 13 South Sebastopol, in relation to all those on the basis that you're a member of Pontypool Community Council, one of the consultees. Is that correct, Councillor Parish?
That is correct.
Thank you. And then Councillor Barry Taylor, in relation to exactly the same 4 applications before committee, 9, 10, 11 and 13, I believe you also wish to declare personal but non-prejudicial interest as a member of the Consulted Community Council. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Tomlinson, again, the same 4 items. As a member of Pontypool Community Council, I believe you wish to declare a personal non-prejudicial interest in relation to items 9, 10, 11 and 13. Is that correct? Thank you, Councillor Tomlinson. Councillor Powell, in relation to items 12, Celtic Park Cwmbran, 13 South Sebastopol and 14 Llantarnam Primary Site, I believe you wish to declare personal but non-prejudicial interest in relation to those 3 applications as a member of Cwmbran Community Council who were consulted. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Councillor Ashley, I believe you have the same declarations in relation to those 3 applications, 12, 13 and 14, but also in relation to item 13, South Sebastopol, some additional declarations you wish to make there, personal and non-prejudicial in each case. You're a member of TCBC Biodiversity Group, the Canal Regeneration Group, Torvine Friends of the Earth and South Sebastopol Liaison Group. Is that correct, Councillor Ashley, in relation to all those?
That is correct.
Thank you, Councillor Ashley. And then Councillor Cameron, in relation to item 12, Celtic Park Cwmbran, I believe you should declare a personal non-prejudicial interest because your grandson trains with the applicant club. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Any other declarations, members, or questions? Councillor Parish?
Yes, one I've forgotten about. I'm a member of South Sebastopol Liaison Group too.
Right you are, Councillor Parish. That's an additional personal non-prejudicial interest. Thank you.
I'm not clear whether Torvine Friends of the Earth have commented on the Tipentus as well.
Okay, Councillor Ashley. Well, I'm not clear either without rereading the report, so I would suggest you declare a personal interest as a matter of caution on that one as well.
I will do then in that case.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sure there's no more now? Good. Okay. Let's move then to item 3, which is the minutes of the meeting of the Planning Committee held on the 14th of March. Can we go through them for accuracy, please? They are numbered page 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. You all happy to accept that they are a true record of the meeting? Moved, seconded. All those in? Yes, thank you. All agreed. Thank you very much. Are there any matters arising or any comments members would wish to make, or indeed officers? Nope. Thanks very much. Okay, now we move on to what is on the agenda as item 9, which is the planning application in respect of Tipentus. It's a longer name than that, but I won't attempt to go through it. We have a number of speakers in relation to this particular item, so I'd be grateful if you could be ready. They are Mrs. Helen Cunningham, Mr. Peter Laxton, Mr. Andrew Lewis, Linda Clarkson, Yvonne Walker, Vic Warren, and potentially a Lee Parsons, all of whom have up to 5 minutes each to speak by coming into the chamber to the designated seat. You don't have to use your 5 minutes, and indeed, if I hear a certain amount of repetition, then I will ask that you not repeat what has already been said, but wind up your remarks as quickly as possible. But there is potentially 5 minutes each, followed by the agent for the applicant, Graham Jenkins, who, under the rules relating to third-party speaking rights, will have 10 minutes to respond to those comments that have been made. But we'll start off with a presentation from Norman Jones as the principal officer relating to this particular item. So if you could go ahead, please, Norman.
Thank you, Chair. If I can deal with some late representations. We've had representation in from Nick Thomas-Symonds MP, who asked that his objections be noted in terms that a local beauty spot will be spoilt, to take consideration of the impact on of HGVs on the local community and the impact on biodiversity. Within the report, we've quoted comments from Lynn Neagle. In addition, she made comments later to those reported, commenting on the value of the site to local residents and the destruction of the ancient woodland with irreversible impact on biodiversity. And in terms of completeness, we also had a comment from Alan Davis, AM, for Blaenau Gwent, reiterating many of the comments of objection, but also stating that he had requested a call-in from Welsh Government, given that the proposal effectively impacts on 3 local authorities. And I would say, Chair, that the report has been seen by Welsh Government and it hasn't been called in. Thank you. We've also received a comment from a Maldwyn Bowen at Maes Canoe Farm, Llanhilleth, and his property is roughly there. He would have attended, apart from ill health, and his concern is the impact on the quality of his water supply, which is a private water supply. However, this is dealt with in terms of comments from NRW. They are satisfied that any excavations won't take place below the water table. However, they would require confirmation in relation to the restoration of the western cut, that it wouldn't impact on that spring catchment for his private water supply. So that's a matter which could potentially be dealt with by condition. In relation, there's a number of corrections that I'd wish to point out to members. At the beginning of the report on page 59 at paragraph 2.5, I've given the nearest dwelling there to the site as Black Barn Farm. It is actually T Ysgubor Ddu, which is approximately 200 metres away from the application site boundary. And then at the, in relation to Blaen Cyffin Farm, that distance is more like 500 metres away from the application site boundary. Tir Ysgubor Ddu is referenced as being the nearest dwelling later on in the report. I've also, in terms of the policy section, we have not, the report has omitted, I go back, sorry, policy S7, which relates to the conservation of the natural and historic environment. You see it in the recommendation for refusal. On page 132, where we talk about landscape impact, it's referenced as policy S3. That should read policy S7. And also, again, on page 133, in terms of paragraph or section 8.5, it should read policy S7, not policy S3. Indeed, dealing with the proposal, this is the application site boundary of the Tepentus cut and surrounding area, as identified in the application site, along with the access route down to the Old Crumlin Road. Members visited the site back in April 2016, and notes of those meetings are in attached to the agenda. In terms of Tir Ysgubor, that's the position of it in relation to the application site. The application site follows the boundary of Torfaen with Blaen y Gwent cutting through the cut or the canyon, as it's sometimes referred to locally. This is an aerial view. Tir Ysgubor identified there, and then the application site basically follows the line of conifer trees with the cut in the northern part of those conifer trees. The main restoration or recovery of stone will take place in this area, which is where the Pennant stone, which is a byproduct of the former open cast, is deposited. This is a more general view, showing it in relation to the various local communities, Llanhilleth and Pantagaseg. And this shows the nearest dwelling, Tir Ysgubor, sitting down in the valley with the application site in the tree belt to the north of it. Access to the site will be from the south via an existing track following effectively a land bridge which separates the two parts of the canyon. And that's the view from the end of Blaen y Cwm Road through that track, which you can follow through on foot to the north of the cut. That's it a little bit further on, and that's the view of the cut looking into the eastern part of the cut from that track. The recovery area is this mound. You can see the tip of it there, mostly covered in conifer trees. Some of those are self-seeded, and that's a view that those members who are on the site visit will recall in terms of walking into the cut from the south, as we did. That's another view inside the cut, and just an example of the Pennant sandstone which the proposal is intended to recover. It's intended to recover 4.75 million tonnes of stone at a rate of 250,000 tonnes per annum. That's an equivalent of almost 1,000 tonnes per day, which will equate to 100 HGV movements per day, 50 of those laden lorries going out. As I've said, access will be from the south, from Blaen y Cwm Road. The site, the proposal is for the land to be gradually restored as each phase goes on. There will be deposit of unusable material also into the western part of the cut over the land bridge, but it'll be a case of gradual restoration. There'll be lagoons formed here to deal with water quality control from the site. And this is an indicative illustrative plan which accompanied the application, showing the potential restoration which would occur. The tree belt would remain initially, however it would then be replaced by a more deciduous mix on the southern boundary, and then the land would be contoured within the site. In terms of the access route to the south, as I said, it utilises Blaenau Road, and it's then proposed to form a new section of road across the corner of the common, therefore moving away from roadside dwellings which are there, and also avoiding this right-angle bend there. It would then junction with Kevin and Crib Road and then into Tishon Shenkin Farm, through the farmland, and then traversing through the ancient woodland to access onto the Old Crumlin Road. That's Blaenau Road looking north on the edge of the common towards the site in the distance. And there's a plan showing the proposed new road across the common, just for the private use of the applicants, and then into Tishon Shenkin, with the access road going down through the ancient woodland to junction onto the Old Crumlin Road. That's a view that was submitted by the applicants. Basically, we've got the television relay mast there. The road would skirt around this hillside to follow the track roughly down to there. You've got the old washery building at that point there, the Old Crumlin Road roughly following there, which runs parallel to the A472. This plan was an amended plan where there was an adjustment to the route to avoid some trees which was submitted. However, the application site still proposes a width of 30 metres through the ancient woodland. That's a view of the ancient woodland from a track, an agricultural track which has been formed in the ancient woodland. However, in terms of overall width, there would be passing facilities so that and retention of the road, and that carriageway width would be 7.1 metres, with retaining structures being proposed within that 30-metre corridor of cleared vegetation which is proposed. These are examples of some of the retaining structures which could possibly be put into the scheme. The applicant hasn't undertaken a full ground investigation, and if the application was to be approved, further investigation work would need to be done to determine what form of final restoration and retention works would be necessary. That's the view from the A472 looking west. This is the band of trees on the A472 with the ancient woodland beyond. That's just a plan showing the access track coming down and junctioning with the Old Crumlin Road at right angles, with an escape lane, an emergency escape lane going on. And this is roughly the position in which the access road would junction with the Old Crumlin Road, with the intention that vehicles should then go west to junction onto the A472 at near the washery building. The applicants have submitted with the application proposals for replacement planting, compensatory planting equivalent to the the amount of area that has been lost, a mix of broadleaf woodland on current grassland within Tearshaw Shenkin Farm. And just you'll see reference in the report to policy M3 of the LDP, and obviously the LDP was adopted in 2013, and the extraction area is within a preferred site for mineral extraction within that LDP. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Norman. Okay, let's go into the third-party speakers then. Ms. Helen Cunningham, if you could come down, please. So much if you could have a seat, make yourself comfortable. No, by wherever you want to sit, I don't really care. But we normally sit there. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Okay. You need to be able to see Mr. James because he will give you a signal with about 30 seconds left to advise you to wind up. Okay. So 5 minutes starts. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for hearing me speak. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Vice Chair of Lanhilleth and Abertillery Community Council. I'm also a community councillor for the Lanhilleth ward, and I'm a resident of Lanhilleth. And I'd like to make the point that's already been made, really, but just to reiterate that this planning application is in a slightly odd position of being decided by Torfaen Borough Council, yet it will actually affect 3 local authorities. So what I'd like to focus on is the local beauty spot known as the Canyon, the disruption that this proposal will cause, and the strength of feeling in the local community. So first of all, I can only speak for the Lanhilleth area, but I believe that it's one of a number of communities that will bear the brunt of the disruption that this causes. This proposal sits directly above Lanhilleth, especially streets including Regent Street, Hyde Place, Oxford Place, but it'll also affect the communities of Sofrid and Brynethau, as well as St Ilters, which is very close to the proposed site. When I heard about this application, myself and my ward colleague, Hedley McCarthy, who's a borough councillor for the ward, went round Lanhilleth and spoke to residents about this. And I can say that the strength of feeling can't be overstated. People are extremely concerned about this. People live very close to the site, and we didn't meet anyone who's in favour of this application. There's a real strength of feeling that we don't want to see this go ahead. The Community Council itself had a number of submissions from the local community, more than I think I've seen for any planning application that we saw. The generational impact of this proposal has to be considered as well. This is a proposal to quarry not just for a few years, but for 20 years. That's going to change the shape and the face of Lanhilleth. It's the local beauty spot, the Canyon, is somewhere that's used regularly, and if you've been up there, then you'll be familiar with it. It's an area that's recovered from the scars of industry, and it's a unique part of our landscape now. So we don't want to see new scars put upon a landscape that's just started to heal. We also spoke to people who've got memories of what went on up at the top of the mountain before, and I can tell you that they're not fond memories. The disruption that causes in terms of the traffic that we've seen, we've heard about the heavy goods vehicles that are going to come through, the noise, the disruption and the dust, people still remember that, and they're really alarmed that they could see that happen again. There's going to be a huge amount of movement if this does go ahead in the local area. Finally, I just want to speak briefly about the impact on biodiversity. We had some very interesting responses in the Community Council from people who actually go up regularly to the Canyon, and they see a number of protected species. They're really concerned about what that's going to do, and I think we know what that's going to do. The ancient woodland, you've seen that the proposal is to drive a track right through it, and although there's proposals for replanting, you can't replace ancient woodland. So just to sum up, really, the Lanhilleth community is against this application. They're very alarmed, and I'd ask the planning committee to take very seriously all the submissions they've received about how this is going to affect local people who didn't bargain on this happening right above their heads. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Peter Laxton, could you come, please? Okay, same drill, Mr. Laxton. Make yourself comfy. Okay, then you run the risk of not seeing the signal, but don't worry. Yes, I think so. And if you could turn the microphone on, and time starts now.
Good afternoon, councillors. My name is Peter Laxton. I have lived at Pantygasseg for about 15 years, and I have been asked to speak on behalf of Pantygasseg Residents Association. The association has gathered about 120 signatures from local residents in a petition objecting to this proposed quarry. The Welsh Assembly used to demand that all councils should provide for some new aggregate extraction so that all councils could bear their fair share of the usual problems that quarries cause. Your Local Development Plan Policy M3 was therefore created, saying that if Torfaen wants to provide more aggregates, then Typentis Cut is the preferred site. The Welsh Assembly demand has now been removed, so it is open to yourselves to simply conclude that Torfaen does not need to provide more aggregate, given the problems that this quarry would cause. Elsewhere in Welsh Assembly policy, it wisely advises that it is better to remove old eyesores such as spoil heaps, which is called secondary extraction, rather than dig new holes in the ground, which is called primary extraction. The proposed quarry can technically be called secondary extraction by the applicants, but it actually suffers from all the problems of primary extraction, since it is physically remote from any transport route, and involves disturbing an area which has been quietly reclaimed by nature over the last 60 years. The proposal is thus contrary to the spirit of Welsh Assembly guidance, since, far from removing an existing scar on the landscape, as you would anticipate for secondary extraction, it would actually create a new scar for the next 25 years. Finally, I want to talk about the two problems which most concern Pantygasseg residents. Firstly, the great increase in road traffic on the minor lanes past our homes. The proposed new haul road up the hill through the ancient woodland would, we understand, be a private road, which would only be available for the operator's authorised lorries. This means that all the incidental traffic, for example, employees' cars, suppliers' vans, plant and private lorries, would try to access via the existing network of lanes. All four possible routes from the site to the outside world are unsuitable for such an increase, and I would expect that drivers from far afield, using sat-nav, would play havoc with our residential amenity. Secondly, the effect on the open upland landscape which we enjoy. Although the cut itself is a scar, it is an old scar which nature is healing. It doesn't need to be opened up again. Not all of the proposed quarry works will be hidden in the cut. Such items as security fencing and lighting would be visible on this hilltop site for miles around, and the necessary improved roads and other infrastructure would further despoil a landscape which is fragile because it is so clear and open at present. In conclusion, the uplands which encircle Torfaen are a valuable green lung whose potential to enhance the well-being of the population is not yet fully recognised. These uplands deserve the future consideration of the Council for their recreational potential, as is happening at the British. But the proposed quarry would be a backward step in recognising the potential of this cherished upland landscape to contribute to the well-being of all. Pantygasseg Residents Association is pleased to see the recommendation for refusal and would invite the committee to consider whether it would wish further reasons to be added, such as extra traffic on existing roads and general effect on landscape. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Laxton. Mr. Andrew Lewis, please. Okay, Mr. Lewis, same drill, please. Make yourself comfortable. And your 5 minutes will start when you're ready. Yes, yes. Not before you've got your glasses, that's fine. And if you can put the microphone on, that's great. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. My name is Andrew Lewis, and I represent Howard Runners Community Association and the surrounding areas. I welcome the reason for refusal. However, I believe there is an equally sound reason for this plan to be refused. I refer to the proposed roadway coming on the old Crumlin Road. I find it baffling that your highway officers think it is acceptable that 100 heavy goods journeys per day for the next 20 plus years onto a recognised cycle path by erecting warning signs to make it safe. Yet, the same officers have prohibited these same vehicles from turning left to protect the residents of Old Furnace. Equally as baffling, they see no problem with these heavy goods vehicles converging on what is already a very busy road, and in addition, the highest polluted area in Wales, and the second highest in the country. Subject I'll come back to for my chair. The report refers to the objections from Caerphilly Borough Council, which has been submitted twice in writing to Torfaen Borough Council. Firstly, to the original proposal, and secondly, after the agent made an amended proposal in April 2014, which you will notice was not, for some reason, mentioned in the summary report. The agent at that meeting made an assumption that only 25 journeys per day would come down Howard Runners Road. Well, that in itself is too many. But when you consider where the aggregate is likely to go, Heads of the Valley Road scheme, for example, and indeed the proposed Circuit of Wales project in Rasa. However, what the agent was unable to do was guarantee that 25 journeys would be the maximum. And I already said that 25 is too many. And now turn to the air quality issue, which has been widely reported throughout the media that Howard Runners Road is the most polluted area outside London. You will all be aware of the Wellbeing of Future Generation Act, brought into being by the Welsh Government in 2015. One of the 7 goals in the Act is for a healthier Wales, and a large section of this covers air pollution. And the Welsh Government pledges to support local authorities who intend to take action to reduce air pollution for all citizens. This matter has been raised in the Senate on numerous occasions by our AM and at Prime Minister's question time at the House of Commons by our MP. The Minister of the Environment at Cardiff Bay has expressed her concerns about the levels of pollution and will be following events closely. I would urge members to add the following reason for refusal: that the proposed roadway coming onto the Old Crumlin Road will have a detrimental impact on residential amenity, highway safety, and last but by no means least, air quality. To leave this roadway as part of the overall plan would be an insult to Caerphilly Borough Council and a betrayal of the community I represent. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. And Linda Clarkson, please. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Have a seat. You know the drill.
I do. Excuse me, get some water. I've got a bit of a throat.
Okay.
Good afternoon all. My name is Linda Clarkson. I'm here today to represent residents of Torvine opposing this application. We are all aware of the need for aggregates, but it's vital we look carefully at how we source them and the complex issues which need to be balanced. At a time when Welsh Government recognise the importance of our wild spaces for the well-being of current and future generations, our culture and heritage, should we not take more care to preserve them intact, not subjecting them to unsustainable exploitation? To quote Welsh Government's guidance, Mineral Technical Advice Note 5, the enjoyment of wildlife and geology provides opportunities for lifelong learning, recreation and tourism. Environments where a rich diversity of wildlife and natural features is appreciated, fostered and enhanced helps to retain jobs, attract inward investment and diversify the economy. The conservation of our natural resources is a necessity, not merely a choice. Let's run through some of the impacts of this application. The new haul route to the A472 will destroy 3 hectares of ancient woodland. Once those trees are gone, they're gone. Important wildlife corridors will be interrupted, foraging and breeding grounds disturbed. There is potential for harmful effects of pollution from noise, dust, light and diesel emissions to designated sites of importance to nature conservation, 4 of which were in 500 metres at the site and Hall Road. The site abuts the regionally important geodiversity site, Otter Hole, and also contains geological feature which is only seen at this site in South East Wales. Whilst these are not statutory considerations, Torvine Borough Council has a duty to ensure they are preserved or improved under MTAN 5. Has it been identified how these features will be affected? Has the risk of pollution to waterways from foul water runoff been adequately addressed? Is there a risk of polluted substances eventually ended up in established waterways, of suspended solids in surface water runoff creating pollution and silting? Is there clarity on how monitoring would be undertaken or what measures would be in place to quickly identify any pollution issues? The sensitive uplands environment is very precious to those who use it for recreation. The tranquility it affords opportunities to walk, cycle, hike and watch a wide range of endangered birds. Many residents visit Typentis Cut, the nature reserve and common, which can be seen when visiting on any weekend. Some even visit to enjoy the dark skies in the winter evenings, myself included. 2 generations will be denied the opportunity to enjoy this environment, which will be negatively impacted for decades. The common may look barren, but it supports much wildlife, as does the cut. We talk of mitigation, but what does that mean? We cannot simply move species on without disrupting the delicate balance of the habitat to which they relocate. Food supplies will be stretched, competition increased, the balance will shift. Wildlife is already in critical decline. What mitigation is in place for the fully protected peregrines and Section 42 species that inhabit the area, such as skylarks? Typentis Cut is an area that increases the biodiversity of the common. Do we really need a restoration proposal in an area that adds to biodiversity? MTAN 5 says biodiversity conservation and enhancement is an integral part of planning for sustainable development, and the planning system has an important part to play in nature conservation. The use and development of land can pose threats to the conservation of natural features and wildlife. Past changes have contributed to the loss of integrity of habitat networks through land take, fragmentations, severance, disturbance and hydrological changes, as well as other adverse impacts. Lastly, the impact of up to 100 lorry movements a day on the common and the already heavily polluted A472 and A4042 poses negative impacts on the health and well-being of residents along these routes. No health impact assessment has been carried out, and Iron Bevan University Health Board not asked to comment. This application, deemed for secondary aggregates, means no restoration bond or full restoration plan in place. At the end of the day, the proposal, if approved, will create a handful of jobs, produce aggregates that could be sourced more sustainably from building waste, but will negatively impact the health and well-being of residents from 3 counties, the safety of our roads and the environment on which our future depends. We thank officers for recommending that this application is refused, but ask councillors to think carefully regarding our objections and consider adding them to the determination of the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Mrs. Walker, please. And make yourself comfortable, please. And if you want to get a fresh glass of water, by all means.
Good afternoon, councillors. Thank you for allowing me to speak on this very important issue. The application has been going on for 14 years now, and the quarrying application for 25 years is unacceptable to us in the community. The applicants have not provided any up-to-date evidence to convince us that the scheme which would affect 3 county boroughs. They cannot be trusted to pay back to the community the detrimental effects that this application will cause. They have not, for all we know, they could all go out of business within the next few years, which is exactly what has happened in the areas further west, for example, at Margam and East Pitts. And then they hive their money offshore, and we never see the money ever again. And promises have been broken, and the local communities have been utterly destroyed by their applications in this. There are several underground water courses on the site, which, if disturbed, could contaminate the water table. We consider this hasn't been carried out sufficiently. Also, the local economy would be affected. There are abiding establishments in the area which would go out of business were this application to go ahead. And also our property values would certainly depreciate. Many of us haven't got lots of savings, but people's homes are their major assets, and therefore the applicants have to consider the fact that our local housing must be preserved for us to be able to continue living or move on, as the case may be. Then again, the lake in the canyon, according to the application, may have to be filled in, and this is totally unacceptable. The lake, along with the precipice, they are part of the unique features which people come from a long way, far and wide, for geological studies, and potentially providing more money for the local economy. And also the access road, the closure of the bridleway for such an unacceptably long time is no good for the community. It would closing off a major bridleway which links Pantygasseg in the south all the way through up to Blymavan it would actually cause total destruction to the local environment. And we didn't consider that this application benefits that the council allow the bridleway to be diverted. This has to be considered really carefully, and I would like to lodge an objection to this for the closure of bridleways for this application. As well as the land being filled in. I saw a red kite the other day, and it was wonderful to see that an old, and also comparing it with what pictures showed of what the canyon used to look like, it would be an absolute sacrilege for it to be destroyed again. And thank you very much for allowing me to speak on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Walker. Mr. Vic Warren, if you could come, please.
I'll leave it switched on.
That's fine, don't worry. Mr. Warren, your 5 minutes starts.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, councillors, for hearing me. I'm Vic Warren. I'm a chartered engineer and chartered environmentalist and Vice Chair of the National Environmental Charity Campaign for the Protection of Rural Wales, on whose behalf I speak. We're very pleased to note that the recommendation is for refusal, although on limited grounds. CPRW considers that other grounds are also material, such as the ecology, and it was good to hear the comments about biodiversity there, but I regret we're missing a Gwent Wildlife Trust speaker in that respect. Torvine is well known as the Eastern Valley, and the extensive upland ridges on both sides are areas of natural beauty for residents and visitors. And they should be given some protection in planning terms as essential parts of Torvine's natural heritage. The area proposed for industrialisation near Pantagaseg is open countryside and common land on an upland ridge that should be valued more for landscape recreation and tourism, not for minerals. The proposal for huge change to this very rural area is also inappropriate because of the effect on the local community, including intensive work, noise, HGV, traffic and pollution at the site, as we've heard from other people, development across the common, and the extraordinary access proposed down the steep bank to the A472. We hope that the committee will have regard to the objections of almost all the local inhabitants and residents and visitors, and that part of the route has been cleared with a question about the requisite felling licence there as well. So the long life of this project is utterly unacceptable, and we believe that it is unlikely that the major disturbance will ever be properly reinstated. In fact, we consider it more likely that extension of mineral extraction will continue, given the vagaries of the planning process, and the character of this upland area will be permanently changed. And I'm sure I'm not the first person to liken this to a new rape of the fair country. I've mentioned the brutal HGV access route proposed to the A472. We're very pleased that the proposed destruction of rare and ancient woodland has been recognised. Ancient woodland is irreplaceable. This would be a particularly serious ecological vandalism. Lastly, I would add further to my first point that the lack of designation within the local development plan of this part of the ridge as a special landscape area is peculiar, and CPRW will campaign for the whole of the ridge to be so designated when the LDP is reviewed. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Calling Mr. Lee Parsons. Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Laxton. In which case, then, we move on to the respondent for the agent, Graham Jenkins, please. Thanks, Mr. Jenkins. If you take a seat, make yourself comfortable. If you want to get a glass of water, a fresh glass of water for yourself, that's okay. And you have 10 minutes from when you switch on the mic. Thanks very much.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to respond to some of the comments that were made, but perhaps first of all, just to make a number of more general comments, if I may. And firstly, to say that we find the recommendation disappointing after the application has been with the authority for determination for over 14 years, and where from 2006, as part of the discussion with your officers, the applicants were encouraged to identify a route for vehicles which avoided the need to run northwards to Abersychan. Having identified that route, we are now surprised to now be faced with a recommendation for refusal based upon that route. As you've heard from Mr Davis, the site is identified in your adopted LDP as a preferred area for the extraction of pen and sandstone. The allocation was made based upon the access road which is proposed, and the allocation was made in the LDP in the full knowledge that there would be some limited effect on the area of woodland arising from the construction of the new access road. This was acknowledged by the inspector in his report of the LDP examination, where in terms of the access road, following his visit to the site, he noted that the area of woodland overall is substantial, and he had not been advised by Torfaen that, in his words, there were any factors which would prevent an acceptable technical solution being arrived at. In those circumstances, again, he expressed himself as being satisfied that the Tir Pentwys site is capable of meeting the aggregate requirements of the borough. Accordingly, he recommended that the Tir Pentwys site with the access road should be confirmed as a preferred area in the LDP, and this was accepted by Torfaen. In the context of this background, the recommendation for refusal is, in our view, illogical and inconsistent with your adopted LDP. The definition of a preferred area in the LDP is an area of known mineral resources where planning permission might reasonably be expected. The applicants have thus pursued the scheme based upon a reasonable expectation that planning permission would ultimately be granted. And if planning permission is now to be refused, it begs the question as to what the purpose of the allocation is in the LDP. It's always been recognised that there would be a limited effect on the ancient woodland, but national planning policy does not place an embargo or absolute prohibition against development taking place within ancient woodland sites. This is just one factor that needs to be taken into account. It's also important to note that NRW do not object to the application based upon the compensatory tree planting mitigation and landscape measures which have been proposed and which were mentioned by Mr Jones. The recommendation for refusal is thus not underpinned by an objection from the relevant technical consultees. It's also important to note, as Mr Jones mentioned, that the route would not run through undisturbed woodland. Some 2/3 of the route would occupy the alignment of an existing track through the woodland, albeit that would be widened in places. The report places great weight on the issue of ancient woodland, but it pays little attention to the balancing effects of economic development. This is important because Planning Policy Wales requires planning authorities to give equal consideration to economic and environmental issues in the decision-making process. And it recognises that there will be occasions where economic benefits outweigh environmental considerations. In this case, the economic benefits are important in terms of mineral supply of high specification aggregates, noting that this is the only minerals extraction allocation in the LDP. If permission is refused, where will Torfaen's contribution to aggregate supplies come from? It is not reasonable to simply assume that the supplies will come from somewhere or elsewhere. Each authority is obliged to make a contribution to regional aggregate supplies. In terms of some of the comments that have been made, Helen Cunningham referred to the canyon. Just to note, as a matter of fact, that there are no public rights-of-way through the site, and there are no closures of rights-of-way proposed. Helen Cunningham referred to the fact that the site is a recovered scar, and we don't want new scars. Our view is that the site is unrestored. There are health and safety issues at the site. We saw from the photographs this morning there are piles of rock. What the scheme offers is a proper restoration scheme, and I think it's also important to note that there are no objections to that restoration scheme, or indeed the development itself within the cut. Mr. Laxton referred to a suggestion that Welsh Government policy had been revised in terms of the need to provide aggregate sites. That is not the case. There has been no change in Welsh Government policy in terms of a requirement for local authorities to make their contribution to aggregate supplies. Mr. Lewis urged the committee to consider other reasons for refusal based upon traffic and landscape. Can I just highlight and emphasise to the committee that there is no basis for this, and this is expressly not supported by your officers in terms of their technical assessment of the development. Mr. Lewis also referred to the possible use of the stone for the Heads of the Valleys Road and the Circuit of Wales. That just emphasises the point. Where is the stone to come from for those important projects? Mr. Lewis also referred to a possible additional reason for refusal relating to Crumlin Road. Again, that is not something which is supported by your highways officers or the public health officers. Linda Clarkson made a number of points, one of which was in relation to the regionally important geological site. That's been expressly addressed as part of the application, with provision to ensure exposures are available as part of the restoration scheme. Questions were also raised about groundwater. Have they been addressed? The short answer to that is yes, and again, no objections have been raised by NRW. Mrs. Walker referred to examples of unrestored sites elsewhere and broken promises, and referred to Margam and East Pitt sites as examples. They aren't comparable. They are large open-cast coal sites. This is an aggregate development. The applicants are members of the Mineral Products Association, where there is a restoration guarantee fund. So, all the objections you've heard, they've all been addressed in the committee report and in 2 environmental statements. We've accompanied the application by a comprehensive range of measures designed to minimise the effects of the development, and importantly, no objections have been raised by any of the technical consultees. The objections that you've heard are therefore not supported by your officers or by external statutory consultees. The committee report concludes that other than the effect on ancient woodland, which we dispute, there are no other issues which would justify a refusal of the application, and you'll see that in the final paragraph of the recommendation on page 136. So, finally, I ask you to reflect carefully on whether the recommendation to refuse the application should be accepted in the context of the identification of the site as a preferred area for extraction, with the implicit implication at the time of adoption that there would be a limited effect on ancient woodland arising from the construction of the access road. I think the applicants, as a final comment, will be very aggrieved if after 14 years awaiting determination of the application, they now receive refusal of permission for a development which they feel is in accordance with your LDP. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jenkins. We'll just give you a little time to get back to your seat. Thank you. I'm going to ask Norman and other officers to comment on the comments that have been made by both the speakers against and for the application. Norman?
Thank you, Chair. Taking up the point that has been made from Graham Jenkins in terms of the status of the site within the LDP. In the LDP, as I noted in the final slide, the actual preferred area did not include the access road. It was limited to the cut and the surround of the cut as a preferred area. The inspector did examine the route of the access road, and he could have included the access road within the allocation. So the allocation is the blue dotted line around the site. The application site is that effectively the hatched area with additional area to the south. So in terms of the LDP, you'll see from in the assessment and conclusion, point 881, we talk about the principle of development, and members will be aware when looking at any application, we have to apply the tests of section 38.6 of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act, which states that to the extent that the development plan policies are material to any application for planning permission, the decision to be taken must be in accordance with the development plan unless there are material considerations which indicate otherwise. Clearly, in favour of the proposal is this allocation as a preferred site within the LDP. However, what we've concluded is that there are policies within the LDP to do with the protection of biodiversity and nature conservation in relation to that ancient woodland, which outweigh the preferred area status within the LDP. So there is a balance to be had there. In relation to issues raised by other speakers in terms of the impact on the landscape, we appreciate that there will be a disturbance to the landscape. However, in looking at this proposal, we had to recognise that this was already a preferred area within the LDP. It is a preferred area in the LDP, and any extraction and recovery of material would obviously have an impact within the cut. And the restoration proposal illustrated, which I showed a slide of, that proposes to replicate the landscape which surrounds it, albeit over a significant period of time, and there will be an ongoing restoration proposal. However, should that be approved, then we would have to have details of that. In terms of other issues, I'll leave Paul Wielden come in relation to highways, and Steve Williams in relation to the ecology issues. In terms of air quality, the applicants submitted further information back in 2014 in relation to the air quality management area which had been established at Haverfordwest. That information was looked at by the environmental health officer in Caerphilly, who came back with the conclusion that the impact from the proposal in terms of potential traffic movements through Haverfordwest would not have a significant effect on air quality. In relation to the RTS, the change in the regional technical statement, which talks about the need for minerals, Peter Laxton made reference to the fact that there was no need for this. What changed with the RTS 1 introduction? They removed the requirement for an apportionment for primary minerals to be extracted within Torfaen. However, it's made clear within the RTS 1 that there would still be a reliance upon secondary aggregates, and this is material which has been previously worked, and we're satisfied that the application proposal meets that requirement and meets the definition of secondary aggregates. Indeed, Tipentus is specifically mentioned within the RTS 1 documents as being a proposal in front of the authority. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Can I just ask a simple question, simpleton's question perhaps, but are you saying in relation to the LDP that the application fulfills most of the provisions within the LDP, with the exception of the particular route through the ancient woodland onto the 8472, or the Old Cumbrian Road?
Yes, Chair, that's the reason for refusal. It's based upon...
Yeah, and therefore the other reasons given by objectors do not stand up to an examination of the provision within the LDP for the application, and that's the only issue which
that is the only issue which we feel on balance that we can defend, given that we have a site which has been through an inspector at a local development plan inquiry. He's identified it as a preferred area. What he didn't do was identify the access route to it within that policy.
Okay. Thanks. Any other officer? Paul, please.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, if I could refer to some points that were made by Mrs. Helen Cunningham and Peter Laxton. I'll deal with those 2 points together, really. The concern was raised by the Mrs. Cunningham and Peter that regarding traffic travelling through the areas of Llaneleth and Pantygasseg. As members will be aware, the significant majority of traffic from this site will be heavy goods vehicles, and the route is the route that was Norman described earlier. There could be some incidental traffic travelling through these areas, but we can condition some of the incidental traffic. But as far as traffic, i.e. cars belonging to workers, etc., we've got to prove and we've got to demonstrate that those vehicles associated with that use will cause such significant harm that we would object to this application. I wouldn't say that the traffic that would be generated by workers, etc., or cars going to the site would be so significantly harmful on any of the existing highway network. It may be that perception is that We don't want these vehicles travelling on these roads, but those roads are public highway, and their intention is to carry traffic. If I could refer then to Andrew Lewis's comments, and it was regarding the Averdrun link onto the old Averdrunnis Road and the mixture of cyclists and heavy goods vehicles on that road. I must say that a significant number of roads throughout the county and throughout the country, cyclists and heavy goods vehicles mix. We did ask for a condition to be put here that we put some adequate signing and some refuge places for cyclists. But again, I've got to demonstrate that that would be so significant again that I would oppose this application, and I can't. Regarding the new Averdrunnis Road or the new link road carrying substantial amounts of traffic, well, it does. It's a main east-west link. It carries substantial amounts of traffic, generally in the peak periods, and this site will be operating throughout the day, so it's only a small proportion of the traffic from this site that will be mixing with Averdrunnis Road traffic at peak times. And again, to try and demonstrate that that actually makes this application fail, I couldn't do that. Norman did mention about Averdrunnis Hill and pollution. That is an existing problem that Caerphilly have in any event within their area that they should address. Thank you, Chair.
Fine. Any other officers wish to comment? Could I ask another question? Oh, go on then, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Just to address some of the ecological issues which have been raised by the speakers this afternoon. My role as the Council's ecologist is to look at planning applications and weigh up the ecological impact of those applications. I've been consistent in objecting to this application on the grounds of the damage to ancient woodland. In terms of the cut, from my own knowledge and from the reports which have been provided by the applicant, I have considered that the ecological impact of the working of that cut can be adequately mitigated for within the context of guidance in planning policy. The ancient woodland is, of course, a different issue. Planning policy Wales is absolutely clear that ancient woodland is an irreplaceable habitat and should be protected from significant damage. I have taken the view that a 30-metre wide haul road through ancient woodland, which potentially damages 3 hectares of woodland, is unacceptable, and that's the basis for my objection.
Thanks. Any other officer? Oh, okay. I just want to ask one question because I'm a bit confused. When we had the site visit back a year or so ago, the reference was made to 50 lorry journeys per day, and I thought it was said earlier in this meeting that it was potentially 100 lorry journeys per day.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That would be 50 in and 50 out. The 50 would be laden vehicles. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Members, any comments, please, or questions? Councillor Evan.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to comment on the information we had off you, Norman, reference Caerphilly done the pollution test then, and came back and said it was practically negative. I'm really surprised when there are 100 heavy goods vehicles travelling through a small area and there's no more pollution. That's all, just a comment, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ashley.
Could Steve elucidate us as to what ancient woodland is, age, species, and what it consists of? Because I think there's implications of that. It's quite important.
Okay, ancient woodland by definition is very old woodland. In England, where there's maps and where there's evidence, they deem ancient woodland to be 400 years plus. In Wales, we don't have that sort of mapping evidence, so it's probably about 200-300 years old. Nonetheless, it is particularly old woodland, and if it's old woodland, it will have developed an ecosystem which is particularly unusual. And it is, as planning policy says, irreplaceable. It's not just the trees, it's the flora and fauna, which is part of the woodland flora, part of the environment of the ancient woodland. So a road cutting through an ancient woodland potentially will have lasting impacts on that ancient woodland. So it is, they are irreplaceable habitats which cannot be mitigated for. You cannot replace a 200-year-old tree with a couple of saplings.
Could I have a supplementary, if I may, please, Chair? Could you explain the uniqueness of that particular valley? Because there is uniqueness and the effect of the street and its place within Torfaen, because I believe we don't have that much of it.
Yeah, it is a significant block of ancient woodland along the valley side there. And when we're talking about landscape scale connectivity, wildlife corridors, mitigation and resilience for climate change, large woodlands, ancient woodlands such as this, are really important features. The road potentially would fragment that feature, causing a whole range of potential ecological issues. So retaining it as a block for its ecosystem services is in keeping with Planning Policy Wales, Environment Wales Act and the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act.
Councillor Taylor.
On this ancient woodland, I don't know whether I'm right in saying this, but are we aware that some of this woodland has already been cut down in ready for this?
There has been, from what I understand, there has been an agricultural track driven through the woodland a number of years ago. I think when you're looking at scale, the track that has been driven through there is probably not as damaging as a whole road might be going through the woodland. But there has been a track driven through there. The thing is about the track is that it's been done in a way that the ground flora, the seed base of an ancient woodland is still in place. So given time, that will recolonize and recreate back to the ancient woodland. So there is a track that's been driven through there, and there has been some trees taken down. But in the context of what we're talking about with this whole road, it is of less significance than the whole road.
Thanks. Councillor Bennett, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to say about the speakers and congratulate them on their presentation. They have done it wholeheartedly, I mean, with such passion as well. And I congratulate them on that. It's very well presented. And looking at this application, we do have it up for refusal. And I know the speakers would like other things added, but I'm sure that the planning officers are putting up for refusal and would look at other things, but they know what would stand as a refusal. With what we've got, the ancient woodland, as Steve says, would be irreplaceable, and when we look around the world when forests are being demolished, and they'll never come back the same. And with 25 years of the aggregates coming out there, it's not in our lifetime, but it's the lifetime in the future, would never bring that back. So I'm glad to see it is up for refusal, and I just hope this will stand when I'm sure the applicant will try and get it back on track. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Seaborn.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask Steve, on page 87 of the report, it mentioned the Peregrine Falcon. It says that it's not been cited, but residents have cited it, and you were waiting for future reports. And I believe Mrs. Walker mentioned the red kite. Has there been any surveys done regarding greater crested newt and freshwater crayfish?
In terms of the species, the bird species you mentioned, the peregrine, from what I understand, peregrine is in the quarry. Peregrine falcons are what we call a Schedule 1 species under the Wildlife and Countryside Act, so they have got particular protection, and we have to consider not just Schedule 1 birds, but all species under the Wildlife and Countryside Act through the planning process. The way species such as peregrines are dealt with within a planning application is that conditions can be placed on any application to ensure that no detrimental harm comes to not just peregrines but other species of value within the context of a planning application. So a Schedule 1 species alone would not prevent a development from being approved, but there would be an expectation that it would be mitigated for, and measures would be put in place to ensure that that species and other species are protected. In terms of the other species, the crayfish and Greek-crested newt, there has been a survey for Greek-crested newt and they came up negative. I don't believe it's been surveyed for white-clawed crayfish because it is not the right habitat for white-clawed crayfish. And what we shouldn't be doing is asking developers to survey for things which are unreasonable. So white-clawed crayfish are not expected to be on site, so they've not been surveyed for. They've been scoped out. Greek-crested newt have been surveyed for, and I came up negative.
If I could just ask, Chair, with the peregrine falcons, will the applicants be issuing safety helmets, dust masks, and are you defenders for the birds' protection? And that's a serious question.
I'm struggling to follow that. So.
You're defenders?
Who?
Well, for the birds. Actually, if they're going to start blasting, stones are going to fly. Are they going to give them helmets to wear? And are they going to give them dust masks to wear over their beaks?
You'd have to catch them first, Councillor Seaborn. It might be difficult. Yeah. Councillor Parish, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I've read the report. I've listened to the presentation and what the other officers and other people have said. And I went on the site visit last April to this site, and considering all, I'd like to propose that this application is refused, for the reasons stipulated on page 136.
That's moved and seconded, but I'm not going to go to a vote just yet because there are other people who wish to speak. So Councillor Cameron and then Councillor Jeremiah.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I want to say thank you to the speakers because although there was such a number of speakers, it was very reasonably done, and I was impressed by that because we've had some moments in here. What I am a little bit confused about, we've got it in the LDP. If we refuse it now, does that create a problem within the borough that we have to find somewhere else in the LDP, or will we actually be criticised because it's in the LDP and we're now saying no? I'm just not quite...
I think what you've got to look at is the regional technical statement. The first regional technical statement we had basically said that the county had to find 400,000 tonnes a year, and that's why we ended up with this allocation of secondary material to meet that. The new technical statement has given our apportionment as 0 tonnes. So if this application gets refused, what would normally happen if you had an apportionment, one of your neighbours would have to take that apportionment, but our apportionment is 0, so our neighbours wouldn't have to do anything for us, we wouldn't have to find another site. I think Norman's report and sort of discussion sort of told you that it was, it's a secondary material, so it's a bit different. It's something you should consider, but it's not necessary to meet a tonnage requirement in the area. It's just, useful and better material.
Can I
Yes,
just
please.
say then, I am clear now. There is no obligation on us to have to provide tonnage at all.
Councillor Jeremiah, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. As the ward member, can I congratulate the residents and the groups on their presentation today. I have got a concern that I stated the last time, and it's actually getting worse. We're on the Old Crumlin Road, because there's not so much, there's a great amount of traffic on there, but because there's not so much traffic on there now, there's a lot of speeding going on. Woodland Park caravan site have complained to me, Albion Road have complained to me, and I got in contact with the police, and I know 2 instances where they put speed cameras up there to try and catch the people. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Waite.
Thanks, Chairman. With all the disruption that this is going to be brought into Torvine, could you tell us how many people would actually be working or involved in the development?
The permanent employment would be 12 within the cut. That doesn't include, obviously, lorry drivers.
If I could just ask on that issue that Neil has just raised, hours of work, what will be the working hours within the site?
Do we know that?
Yes, it's in the report on page 60. All hours of operation would be between 7 and 7 o'clock Mondays to Fridays, and also 7 o'clock to 7 o'clock on Saturdays as well. No operations will take place on Sundays or public holidays. And then below that, it says it's anticipated that the operation will create 12 employment positions on the site.
Okay. Does anybody who's not spoken as yet want to speak from members? Because I've got others who want to speak for a second time. So, no. So, Councillor Evans and then Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. It's a point of clarity, really, regarding the Blaenau Gwent Ecologist's request for an ES statement, which he said he doesn't have. Could you answer why that was the reason, or is it inaccurate?
Which page is that? Sorry.
Page 109. It's the response from the Blaenau Gwent Ecologist. It goes on to 110 at the bottom, relating to dust. And if you want me to read it out, as our environmental health officer has been unable to gain access to any of the original ES documents, I wonder if you could confirm or deny that.
Well, they could have requested to have sight of those. They are available to the public, and certainly the other consultees have made comments back in response to the ES. So I'm not quite sure why they failed to do that.
I thought, Chair, if you'd allow me, it would have been very appropriate for us to give that information to the ecologist.
I suppose it depends on when the ecologist made that observation as well. So, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. When I discovered this report was coming to this council, which is the last council of this authority at the moment, I just wondered what was going on, because on a matter of this importance, I wondered whether there was enough consultation done, because I didn't know about it until the other week. I am pleased that there are a lot of people here. They come here and give them their objections honestly and truthfully. this has been going on now for 14 or more years. There are still major flaws, I believe, in this, you know, especially with the traffic, where it says 75% would go to Pontypool and 25% to Crumlin. You know, this will have a major impact, not just for Averdrinnis and the people there and on top of Pantagasset, but it will have a major impact for the whole of Torfaen. And, you know, I've heard all the arguments here, and I've got to be honest, I think before this is brought back for planning again, there got to be a lot more answers to questions before any decision is made in this council.
Okay, no doubt the powers that be will note that. But for the moment, we're going to try and determine this particular application because that's what we've been asked to do. So, does anybody else wish to speak? We have had a motion to the effect that the report or the recommendation of the officers be approved, and that's been seconded. Does anybody wish to put forward an amendment?
I would like to put forward an amendment that more investigations are done into this before it comes back to a planning authority.
Yeah. How do you imagine that's going to work, Councillor Taylor? Because this committee is being asked to make a decision. Are you asking to defer any decision being made for now?
No. Only on further applications.
So you're suggesting that when a future application, if it is made, when it is considered, the committee at that point should be considering whether or not there is sufficient information.
Yes, because we have heard 50 loads. I have heard off one objector 25, then all right, you said that's 50 loads. Once you give planning permission to anybody, they will increase or decrease whatever. I'd like the true facts.
But, Councillor Taylor, the motion before the committee now is to refuse the planning application. So we're not going to deal with a hypothetical application today. So I'm afraid I'm ruling that out of order. Okay. Anybody else got any ideas about moving an amendment? Yeah, well, okay, let's just give people an opportunity to say what they want to say. No. Nobody wants to put forward an amendment? Okay, so we...
Chair.
Oh.
Yeah.
Councillor Tomlinson.
Yeah, just to say, I think the speakers spoke passionately about this, on this application. Linda Claxon brought up one particular point which she wanted included within the refusal. Could I seek clarity and ask again what actually Linda Claxon point that she's brought up that she wanted included?
My recollection is that Linda Clarkson talked about natural resources, pollution, air and light and waterways, talked about the 42 species and pollution on the roads. And that's the word I couldn't read. Okay, did you hear that, Councillor Tomlinson?
Yes, I heard that. And I was thinking if we could elaborate a little bit more and shorten it down, could we include that as an amendment?
Well, we've got a bit of a difficulty because Mr. Williams, Steve Williams here, sorry Steve, spoke about the biodiversity in the woodlands, in the ancient woodlands, and indicated that was one of the strong reasons why he felt that the ancient woodlands should not be jeopardised by this application. Now, there are other aspects of biodiversity elsewhere within the site, but you've heard what's already been said in relation to the LDP. So I think the refusal of allowing the woodlands to be used, the ancient woodlands to be used, actually is largely on biodiversity grounds, albeit not necessarily the full range of biodiversity that some of the speakers would like to be included in the grounds for refusal. But you've also heard what the officers have said about the LDP and what is envisaged when that LDP provision was made. So I think that's a complication which, it's up to you, but I think that's a complication which might be more difficult than it's worth.
Yes, okay. I think you cleared that up, and that's fine.
Well, I'm not trying to stop you putting forward something, but you need to have that wording pretty damn quick. Councillor, do you want to say anything at the moment, or are you just asking that for progress?
I think, Chair, you summed it up beautifully in the spirit of what these things was happening. Could we just move to a decision, if we may, please, if everybody's okay?
Okay, last opportunity. If you want to move an amendment, I need it now. No. Okay, well, we go to the vote then. The vote, or the motion, is that the application be refused in accordance with the officer's recommendation for the reasons stipulated in the report. All those please show. And that is unanimous. Thank you very much. We'll now have an adjournment for a few minutes. No, it's not you. We don't order yet. Yeah, but because we've got a speaker or two in relation to this particular item, we'll take that next. So if you could find the proposal for that particular item, which is item 12, for whom we have hopefully Sue Price, hi, and Tyrone Burke, hi, and we'll be asking you to speak in due course, both of you. So, in the meantime, Scott is going to make a brief presentation about the proposal. Thanks.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is an application submitted by Celtic Park Football Club. They're looking to construct a 250-seater stand. The block plan showed there. It's going to be centrally located on the southern edge of the most northern football pitch. It's measured in about 65 metres away from the curtilage associated with the dwellings fronting Llantarnam Road to the east. So subsequent to the meeting with members on site, the applicant has provided an amended sort of elevation, which is shown here. It is actually of a smaller massing than which was originally submitted. So it now measures 33.5 metres in length, 2.94 metres in width, and a maximum height of 2.9 metres. It still comprises 4 levels of seating, and it would be of a steel construction with a corrugated sheeting finish. This is the visualisation that the applicant has provided, just to give an indication of what it's likely to look like as well. And then these are site photographs taken from Llantarnam Road looking down, the top one, the bottom one taken from the southern edge of the pitch looking up. Oops, sorry. And then the top one there looking towards the residential properties to the east, and then the bottom image sort of looking from south to north up to the sort of car parking area which forms the sort of western boundary. That's it, really.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Price, if you would care to come down into the chamber and spend 5 minutes, no more, on your objection, please. Care to take a seat just there, and opposite the microphone, and there's a glass of water there if you want to have one. And once you're ready, once you're comfortable, you'll have 5 minutes to state your objection.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
First of all, the residents of Lantana would like to thank you for giving us the opportunity to state our objections to the stand. As you'll appreciate, we do have a number of concerns, which I will briefly detail. Firstly, noise. The residents already experience an unacceptable level of noise pollution, which will only increase. What measures are you proposing to ensure that the residents are able to enjoy the right to peaceful enjoyment of their possessions? Please refer to our letter dated the 14th of March, Item 1, Human Rights Act. Parking. As you're already aware, there have been a number of disputes relating to parking in the rear lane, which has unfortunately resulted in local police having to attend. Due to the inappropriate parking of vehicles, residents have been able to access or park on their property. As parking is very limited at the front of the street, what are your proposals to ensure that residents have unrestricted access to their properties? Drainage. The rear lane already suffers from serious flooding, and on occasions access has been cut off. If the proposed drainage scheme does not work and the flooding situation worsens, who will cover the cost for improved drainage and any potential damage to properties? Toilet facilities. We would suggest that the current facilities are inadequate due to the area around the playing fields being used as public conveniences, which my 4-year-old grandson has unfortunately witnessed. Operation and usage. We have been informed there will be no change, but I think it would be entirely feasible that the new stand will bring additional supporters, thus increasing the anticipated 40 spectators to an unmanageable level for the site, especially as 40 we consider already as unmanageable. So in conclusion, following the site visit, you can appreciate how close the main pitch is to the local residents. Taking this into consideration, together with our other concerns, we would request that this planning application is rejected, together with the requirement that the siting of the main pitch is moved to the other end of the playing fields, more towards the cemetery, or use the stadium facilities, which already has an adequate stand and better toilet and support facilities. This would help to minimise the disruption to local residents and hopefully improve the relationship of both parties. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Mr. Burke, if you would mind coming down and responding, please. Again, 5 minutes.
I've been caught a little bit cold with this. I was only informed to come here today because the person dealing with it unfortunately isn't available. I've listened to the ladies' points and the residents. This isn't an influx of supporters coming to suddenly support Cwmbran Celtic. This is a matter where the FAW Welsh League has imposed upon us a stand for 250 seats. We're not expecting anybody else. Noise levels will stay exactly as they are. There's not going to be any further disruption. This, unfortunately, is a must-have that if Cwmbran Celtic do not erect the stand, we will lose our position as Welsh League One and unfortunately drop out of that, and the monetary part of it for ourselves, for community, providing football playing for kids and everything else will suffer. As far as relevant points about drainage, yes, we are looking at drainage. The drainage problem is we've had one contractor in explaining to us about percolator tests and everything to do with Welsh Water, which to take the drainage away across the main fields. I've got another contractor coming in to give us further tests on it. Toilet facilities, there are adequate toilet facilities and they've been upgraded, once again, with the FAW guidelines. The only thing I can say that as far as we're concerned is drainage we are trying to work on. The rest of it, there is not going to be any further disruption, sir, and that's as much as I can give you.
Sure now?
Yeah, I could go on for a long time, but
Okay.
give me 5 minutes, I've tried to get it down, so.
Okay. Fine. Thanks very
Thank
much,
you.
then. If you wouldn't mind going back up. Okay, members. Give Mr. Burkett 20 seconds to get back into the chamber. But would you have any comments or questions, please? Who's going to start? Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions, be very brief. The first one is, how many matches are we talking about in total year? And I mean in a week sort of thing. That's the first question, Scott. And the other question, as Mrs. Price has made some comment about perhaps reconfiguring the stand from where it is now, where it wouldn't have so much a noise effect. Has that been considered as well?
In terms of the usage and how much the pit is used, I'm not 100% in terms of the usage of the pitch on a weekly basis. In regards to noise, the stand is situated 65 metres away from the curtilages. The Environmental Health Department were consulted and confirmed no objection in regards to noise implications for the proposed stand.
There's no other consideration to reconfigure it somewhere else on the ground?
We didn't feel there was a need to do so, given the stance taken from environmental health and the distance from the residential curtilages. So, no.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay, anybody else, please? Councillor Ashley.
When we did the visit down there, one of the observations that was made about the back of the residential houses down there and the car park that belonged to Cwmbran Stadium, and the preferred option, from what I can gather down there, was for people to go into the Cwmbran Stadium side of it. Have you addressed that problem?
It's sort of a current situation where I think the supporters mainly utilise the car park into the west of the site. Understand there has been sort of historic conflict in regards to the private lane and the parking along there, but we didn't consider the siting of a stand to change the existing situation really in terms of parking arrangements.
So the private lane at the back of Llantarnam Road houses, people shouldn't be parking there anyway unless they are associated with those houses. And is there redress potential available for the residents should other people park where they shouldn't? Yes, yep.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The issue regarding the lane is private, so it is for the owners to address the situation there, whoever those owners are. And those owners, by right, can prevent people going into that lane who have no right to be there. It could be said as well that there are certain people that may have prescriptive rights to access it and have rights of access, but it's a private issue. And the issue of obstruction, if the residents or someone feels that people using that lane are obstructing the access into that lane, it becomes a police issue. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Anyone else? Anyone got a view as to whether or not this application should be approved? Councillor Seaborn.
Thank you, Chair. I attended the site visit, and I got sympathy with the residents, but I would like to move this application subject to the conditions within the report.
Okay, is that seconded? Councillor Waits and a number of others. Do you wish to debate it? No? Councillor Taylor.
Yes, my concerns is the drainage and what the drainage officer has said. Could I have a bit more information on this from officers, please? Because on page 94 it says some public sewers and drains may not be recorded on the mapping, and because it's on clay there could be problems.
Yeah, I verbally discussed drainage with our drainage officer, where he did confirm there was sort of clay subsoil, where sort of soak away wouldn't be an appropriate method. So therefore we've attached a condition requiring an appropriate drainage strategy be submitted and approved by the council prior to any works commencing.
Okay, Councillor Taylor. Anyone else? Are we ready to make a determination? Councillor Seaborn, you I think moved to the effect that the application be approved. Yes, maybe. Is that seconded? Does anybody wish to put forward an amendment other than an obvious negative? No? You ready to vote? All those in favour, please show. That is in favour of the recommendation that the officers have put. All please show. That is carried unanimously. I'm sorry, Mrs. Price and others. That's it, I'm afraid. When I say I'm sorry, I'm not trying to show any great bias one way or the other, but this has been dealt with in accordance with the council procedures, and unfortunately, because it is a private lane, it is a matter which essentially you have to deal with, hopefully with the help of the police when appropriate. Okay. I don't know. I think you need to consult a lawyer, but certainly if you want to discuss the matter with the appropriate officer in the council, then that's your privilege. His name is Mark Strickland. I'm sure he'll be delighted to hear from you. Thanks. Okay, if you want to leave, that's entirely up to you now. Thanks. Well, Tim's looking at me in a bit. Smiling, I think that's... So we're going to deal with item 9 now, which is the erection of 2 industrial blocks, blah, 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 at the Uskvale site. 10. Sorry, yes, I'm enumerate. Number 10. No. I can't find it that quick. 141.
141.
Okay. Settle down now, folks. Helen, if you could present, please.
Yeah, the application we have in front of us today is a full application for an allocated site. It's for the erection of 2 industrial blocks of units. B1, B2 and B8 industrial uses proposed. They're designed for flexible purposes. Block 1 has a floor space of 1,464 square metres and Block 2 has a floor space of 1,318 square metres. This application, as it forms part of a wider allocation, is actually phase 1 of the development. Here we have the 2 blocks. Here we have the main roundabout at Mamailed. This is the existing access road that's already been constructed. Here's Block 1 and here's Block 2. Here are some sections through the site. It's part of this proposal, ecological mitigation is proposed due to some damage that's already taken place on the site from site clearance. This includes the provision of grasslands and also a long-term habitat and management plan for the site to ensure its long-term provision and maintenance. Here are the elevations, and that's Block 2. And here is a photo montage of the site provided by the applicant. This is heading into the borough along the trunk road. And this is looking from inside the site out towards the roundabout. And there you have the listed building of the Mamailed Nylon Spinners factory. We were concerned about the quality of the design, so the applicant invited officers down to have a look at a site they'd previously developed in Ystrad Mynach. So here are some photographs of the type of buildings which will be on the site. Here's the application site itself as it is at the moment. You have a large plateau area, and there's also a bunge here which is proposed to be enhanced with landscaping and screening to establish a more landscape setting for the development. You had the access road, which has already been developed as part of the allocation for the site, formerly the Welsh Development Agency. This is the area where the second block will be provided. Here's the existing access road. If planning permission is granted, this will be phase 1, so the future development will then come forward later on. And here's the access road, and you can see that bund there, and the site is at a slightly higher level, but this will be additional planting and screening and ecological mitigation will be provided at this location. There you go.
Thank you very much. I should have mentioned that you will have had circulated to you today a report of the site visit of the 31st of August 2016. So some of us were there and hopefully can remember what we spoke about at that time. Councillor Steeborn can remember, I think.
It was very cold, Chair.
Was it? It was August. Anyway,
it's still cold.
Let's move on. This has got a sort of end of term comment sort of air about it, isn't it? Serious now, folks. So, does anybody wish to ask a question or make a comment or move a motion?
Very quick question about ecological survey, because I forgot that was the site of the Bethyn Brook when we visited there. And the Bethyn Brook's rather interesting little stream because it goes the opposite direction of everything else and ends up in the River Usk, if I remember rightly. And it says in this report, which I was intrigued by, it's a floodplain, and it's also got some significant bits of ecology, like reptiles and things. Could you sort of answer a bit? I know Steve's not here, unfortunately, but it goes opposite of everything we've got round here and ends up round in us, doesn't it? Which is quite intriguing.
Stuart, does the answer to this question have an impact on the way in which you're going to vote?
Not really, no. It's just,
No.
It's the impact of the ecology there. That's what I was asking about.
Yes, yeah. The site is actually a site of important nature conservation, but that's mainly allocated due to its grasslands. Unfortunately, the developer did go onto the site before submitting any planning application, stripping the site, causing some damage. We've negotiated some mitigation to compensate for that damage that's already occurred by the habitat management plan and the grasslands planting. Yeah, you do have the brook running through the site. It is culverted through the site, so there's minimal impact on the watercourse itself from an ecological point of view. But it is, as you said, forms part of the site is within a flood zone, but that has been addressed in the report and a flood consequence assessment has been carried out.
Is there anything of significance in there, like crayfish or any of those sort of things in there?
No, the Council of Ecologists has requested for a reptile survey to be carried out on the main site, so we have conditioned that. But because of the works that have already been taken place and the type of the site, highly unlikely, but as a precaution, condition.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Parish.
Thank you, Chairman. In the presentation, you mentioned the quality of the buildings. We've seen pictures of what they intend to erect on this site. Are you satisfied that they are up to a good quality?
Yes, we did have concerns when the plans were initially submitted. Given the, we felt that it was a gateway site and we were looking for high quality development. This project that the applicant is proposing is very much designed for flexible spaces, and the standard of the design is lower than what we would have ideally liked. But given the lack of the development brief for the site and the fact that we were encouraged by visiting the site in Ystrad Mynach in terms of the quality of the materials and the additional planting and landscaping that we've achieved, we were satisfied that they've addressed our concerns in terms of the quality of the development and the design impact.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Siebel.
If there are no more comments from members or questions, Chair, may I move the officer's recommendation subject to the 22 conditions within the report.
That's been moved and seconded by Councillor Waite, I believe. Excellent. Does anybody wish to speak to that motion? Does anybody wish to move an amendment? Are you ready to vote? All those in favour of the recommendation to approve, please show. Subject to the 22 conditions. That's unanimous. Thank you. We now move to item 11, for which there is a paper which has been distributed today and on which Scott is just going to show us the map and say a few words.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This is an application submitted on behalf of Bronhaven Housing Association. It's for full planning permission to construct 12 units. They're proposed to be located within 3 two-storey blocks, as shown on the plan there, which are going to be 2-storey in height. They're going to benefit from utilising the existing hammerhead at the site to create the access and the car park into the front. The accommodation type is going to be supported starter accommodation for 16 to 24-year-olds who are under the Bronhaven Own 2 Feet service. The units themselves comprise of 3 one-bed units and 9 two-bed units. The ground floor flats benefit from sort of rear private amenity space, with the first floor flats benefiting from either a terrace to the rear or a side balcony feature. The the elevation is going to be of a cladding finish with the roof comprising a profiled roof sheeting. Including sort of an extract there in terms of how it relates to the existing dwellings on the bottom in terms of scale. Also here are some 3D visualizations provided by the applicant. Then these are site photographs taken, a bit misty, but looking towards, well, in a northerly direction, as you can see, it's kind of scrub land which is kind of bordered by perimeter fencing in all corners. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Please kick off. There don't appear to be many. Many of you will have been on the site visit, of course. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, regarding the letter from Bronavon, because I was the one that raised the issues about balconies and antisocial behaviour. Bronavon has answered the question. They will deal with that matter, so I hope they do.
So do we all. But that would be premature because we haven't yet approved it. So does anybody wish to speak about whether we should approve it or not? Councillor Waite.
I'd like to put a recommendation that we move it with the officer's recommendations.
It's been moved and seconded, subject to the conditions. Are you ready to vote? All those in favour, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. Yes. Well, let's ask Stuart. Mike came back after the break briefly, didn't he?
The evening now, Chair, unfortunately.
But he left after item 11, didn't he?
Yeah.
No, after item 10. Sorry, item 10.
Yeah,
okay,
item 10.
We need to have it recorded. Okay, thanks. We are now up to item 13. And you're too lazy to turn over pages. 197. Oh, he's got his technology. Very good, very good. I'm really impressed. Helen, could you... this is the South Sebastopol one, so yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this application relates to the second phase of part one, the second part of phase one of the South Sebastopol development. It's for 102 dwellings, and it's on the part of the Tirbrüchiad development site located to the east of the canal. Here we have the general layout of the site. The application also includes the replacement of Bevans Lane canal bridge. Here we have Tirbrüchiad, the listed farmhouse, and here we have the block of woodland to be retained. This is phase one, the first part of phase one, which is currently under construction. Here we have the canal, and the basin is in this location here. Here we have the properties which will be fronting onto the canal. It'll form terraces of cottage-style properties. From the front, they are two-storey, but due to the level differences of the canal and the field in which they are sited, they will have raised platforms to the rear with car parking below those retaining walls. Here we have some more typical sections through the site of the house types on the development. They basically form the same type of development already permitted on phase one. Here we have an illustration. This is plot 34, I believe, which is located adjacent to the canal. Here is the Bevans Lane Bridge, and the new access road will follow Bevans Lane and then spur off around the farmhouse. Here we have we've been in discussion with the applicant in terms of the footpath and lane which will continue along from Bevans Lane. We were trying to retain the historical line of that footpath. We have managed to, the applicants have agreed to re-look at the engineering solution in terms of because of the level differences in this location, and they have been able to submit this amended plan which shows a more direct route which helps visually keep that linear, the historical line of Bevans Lane. Here's photographs from the canal. This is looking up towards Bevans Lane Bridge. This is the area where the canals will be where the cottages will be fronting onto the canal, and then this is looking south then with the field on the left. Here's some more images of the canal, and this is the woodland which is to be retained, with development in between the canal and the woodland. Here we have the canal basin. This is the only area where it's been accepted that there will be a strong frontage onto the canal. The remainder of the entire site, there's a significant buffer from the canal to protect its character. Here we have the listed farmhouse in the distance. And then this is the rest of the development site to the north of Bevans Lane. And here we have the existing line of Bevans Lane. This is where we were trying to negotiate the continuation of the line in terms of the reorientation of the footpath, as this road will be sweeping down to the left and around the farmyard. Here we have the woodland, and then here is the canal. This is Bevans Lane Bridge, in the approach to it. And this is the relatively modern Bevans Lane Bridge, which is proposed to be replaced with a more traditional style bridge. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Any questions or comments? Councillor Parish.
Thank you, Chairman. The bridge is going to be replaced. Have you got any illustrations what the new bridge is going to look like?
I don't, I'm afraid. I haven't put it in the presentation. It's similar. What they've done is it's going to be a stone constructed bridge. They are raising the floor of the bridge slightly, and they're replacing the concrete. It will have a stone. Originally it was going to be fairly straight, but we've negotiated more of an arch, which is more akin to a traditional canal bridge. But it's still quite low level structure, but stone structure. As it's a conservation area, we have to preserve and enhance the character of the conservation area, and the replacement of this modern structure with a more traditional designed bridge is considered acceptable.
Councillor Ashley.
Yeah, I didn't get, when we did the visit, I didn't get, I presume the clearance height under the bridge for the cycleway and the path would be exactly the same as it is now, because it's actually quite generous, that one. The other comments was about what retention of wood, trees, etc. I was looking for it in here because obviously the conversations we've had over the years about what they're retaining. Recently I did have a walk around and looked at mature oaks with other people. I assume it's very detailed planning here that a lot of that stuff's going to remain. Are we looking at TPOs all over the place for that lot?
Just in terms of the canal bridge, the actual base of the bridge is actually going to be slightly higher than what is as existing, so it is an improvement in terms of the distance from the towpath and the bed of the bridge. In terms of the landscaping, there had been an approved strategic landscaping scheme as part of the outline. There were some differences with this application, in terms of the canal frontage. Part of the hedgerow had previously been agreed to be removed, but due to the change in how they were going to address the canal frontage with the dwellings. Slightly more of the hedge is proposed to be removed. We have had mitigation proposals to offset that. If I go back to the layout, I'll refer you to the relevant section. Yes, the strategic landscaping approved roughly about that much of the existing hedgerow to be removed. This proposal now also includes this area of hedgerow to be removed. We asked the applicant to justify and provide a response in terms of the rationale behind this and what the mitigation proposals are. Mitigation is proposed to, there will be a strong hedge line along the frontage of the properties. They will have pedestrian walkways into the properties, but you also have these line of trees. They will form a higher level of connectivity as well as the hedging, and our ecologist officer has accepted that rationale and those mitigation measures.
We're not going to, are we going to lose any what might be regarded as ancient hedgerow or ancient trees? Because that's the concern. Because if you walk round there, which I certainly did a couple of weeks ago, there's a lot of stuff there that, you know, I know some of it will have to go, but there's a lot of what might be regarded as fairly ancient hedgerow around the place as well. I don't know what rationales. I haven't seen. Obviously, I remember the early maps that we looked at. Some of that was sacrosanct, some of it wasn't, and we're on the line of that now, aren't we?
Yes, yeah, we are being very careful to make sure that all the principles established in the outline are brought forward through into the detailed reserve matters applications. And where they do differ, we do really consider those very carefully, hence the request for the applicant to justify the slight departure. In terms of the ancient woodland, it's not an ancient hedge. It's once he'd been out on site, the Council of Colleges thought that the hedge wasn't of high quality, which meant that he was happy with replacement hedge in this instance. This is the existing woodland which will be retained. There are a few trees, you know, through the development parcels, but those have been accepted to be removed as part of the outline planning application. But going forward, obviously, the large feature of this site is its landscape setting and the mature landscape setting. So we will be looking to put tree preservation orders on those which are to be integrated into the development.
Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Chair. It's in relation to the comments made by Torvine Friends of the Earth, and it's bullet point 7, the responsibility for the boundary edges, because as they point out, they could be replaced by fencing in the future. Where are we with that now?
Yeah, we had that concern as well, and we agreed with Friends of the Earth. On a more detailed drawing that we have, the fence line was actually going to be on the inside of the hedge, and the hedge will actually form part of the hedge and the trees will form part of the management plan, and the management company's responsibility was taking over the site.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Taylor.
Yes, going on from Councillor Parish's comments regarding the bridge design, I am reading on page 206 what we have said, that the proposed replacement bridge is not in accordance with our current best practice. And then the last paragraph, on the basis of the information available, they are to address these concerns. I think really there should be more detail in here on what they are going to do.
We have got detailed drawings of the bridge with all the measurements. As I didn't include it in the presentation, so I apologise for that. But in terms of the height from the towpath, the Canals and River Trust guidelines say that it should be 3 metres above water level and 2.7 metres above the towpath level. The drawings we have show it's 2.8 metres from the towpath, and the existing Bevans Lane Bridge has a height of 2.2 metres. So it's a significant increase from the existing situation, but only slightly lower than the recommended guidelines. And Canals and River Trust do actually say in their comments that they are aware that there are other bridges in the vicinity that don't comply. So they accept that, you know, it would be difficult to insist, given that there are surrounding bridges which are lower, to insist that they rigidly stick to their guidelines and their recommendations. So we were satisfied with that.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Parish?
Thank you, Chairman. The Ecology Officer. I'm looking at page 211, and he does say, with regard to the loss of field boundary adjacent to the canal, I can confirm I am prepared to accept the proposed replacement feature. Then he goes on to, in doing this, I recognise there will be an impact on the ecological functionality of the canal corridor, certainly in the short to medium term at least. And he goes on to say any lasting long-term impact will depend on the ability of the management of the company, you know, to manage it. Well, I think that's a little bit, to me, you know, it's not doing enough for the ecology, because it is a big thing about this site, the loss of wildlife and the ecology. And I mean, the hedgerows are not going to be the same as they are now. You've already said that. And we will lose that connectivity in the meantime. And I can't see why the wildlife will go back in the long term to what it is now. Do you know what I mean? You have, you know, to me, it isn't doing enough to keep the wildlife.
The application, as the outline application was subject to environmental impact assessment, this application also had to include an addendum to ensure that the detailed proposals do comply with the original assessment. As this was a slight departure, they re-looked at this, and it was concluded that there would be an impact in the short and medium term, given that they were removing the hedgerow. However, this would be offset with the mitigation of providing, I think they've called it a ready hedge, so it's quite a mature hedge which will be planted. So from day one, as soon as it's planted, you have reasonable coverage, and obviously the trees that would be going in at a fairly good standard. So they will obviously take time to mature and establish, but both the applicant's ecologist and the council's ecologist is satisfied that in the long term it should encourage the connectivity of that part of the canal.
Just a sort of general observation. I mean, the South Sebastopol development is a huge development, and this is, I forget which phase of stage, whichever at the moment, but the point is that there's going to have to be a long-term relationship between the planning authority and the developer, and indeed, I think, with the liaison group and the management company. So those sorts of issues can be discussed in those arenas, but certainly if there are issues which planning committee in future feels is inappropriate, then I'm sure officers would be prepared to discuss those with the planning committee at that time. So, and I'm sure the developers and the management company want to have an ongoing relationship to ensure that the matter is, or all matters are dealt with as far as possible with agreement. Councillor Ashley.
I notice in here the Canal and River Trust makes an interesting observation about the navigation, bearing in mind that it goes right through the middle of this development. It makes an observation about the bridge, which is one aspect of it. It also makes an observation which is interesting because it relates it to Llangollen and the Montgomery Canal things about the route and how it's managed. I think that's an interesting note it's got in there, because the management of the canal, and we'll go back to Mark Strickland, and how this canal up to Pontymoyle is managed by the Canal and Rivers Trust, and then from down to here it's managed by this council, and obviously the developers are going to have a very large impact on this canal, and the preferred option is once there's a lot of implication in having a development on this canal and getting this back into some form of more navigation than there is at the moment. And my concern is also that Canal and Rivers Trust has also got a responsibility in terms of ecology, which it makes the point here. And obviously we're wanting to get the thing open through to Newport as well. So I think any implication of what happens on this bit is going to have a knock-on effect on the rest of it. I think they make a very good point in here on that.
Yes, I mean, and all that was considered as part of the outline planning application in terms of the purpose of the canal. There will be, during the physical development of the canal bridge, there will be some disruption to any barges that want to use the canal. However, similar to public right-of-ways, that is up to the developer to manage and to make sure that's done in the appropriate manner. But in terms of the impact on the canal, hopefully this will have a positive impact in terms of encouraging people to use the waterway more and provide actually a destination in its own right.
I mean, I think the implications about moorings and dredging and the rest of it, I know our officers that are responsible for that have a problem with that, because obviously that requires resources.
Yes, that's right, it does.
Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Parish.
Thank you, Chairman. Friends of the Earth have a really good point about the public. They enjoy the use of the towpath, and I'm looking at now page 2 and 2, going on to page 2 and 3. The houses planned so close to the canal infringes the aspect enjoyed by the public using the towpath and compromises the canal conservation corridor which the council placed on the canal towpath for its own protection. And they go on to say about the height of the building so close to the towpath will have an overbearing effect on the visual enjoyment of the canal. And then they go on to say about there's no demarcation of gardens, they need defining, and the level of light pollution from the houses is all going to have a big impact on the canal, and it's not going to be the same after this for the people who enjoy walking on that towpath now, and I don't think that's been taken into consideration.
It was taken into consideration as part of the outline planning application, because this was the only, this and the village core area opposite was the only place where we didn't have that buffer in place, because it was felt that because of the basin and the village core, it needed to have a strong canal frontage, and that's what the development brief for, for the site has set. So this proposal is in compliance with the principles that have already been established as part of the outline planning application. As part of the outline application, there was also the environmental statement included a landscape and visual impact, which would have assessed the impact on the canal and the wider landscape. This current application has done the addendum and concludes that there is no significant changes to change that assessment. So it has been assessed, but mainly as part of the outline planning application when we were looking at the principle of the development. Because obviously the impact on the landscaping and particularly the canal and conservation area is of primary concern. In terms of the impact on the canal conservation area, the properties have been designed similar to canal-side cottages. The developers have taken reference from similar properties in elsewhere on the canal, not particularly in this location on the canal, but elsewhere in terms of strong frontages. So they can be stone-built dwellings, and it was felt important that to improve that area and the village core and integrate the development into the canal, and the purpose, just in this location, that it was considered that this was the most appropriate solution.
Yes, I'm sure the houses will be lovely. They wouldn't sell them if they weren't up to a standard to encourage people to buy them. But the point I'm making, not enough. I know you've said it went through with the outline planning application, but to me that doesn't make it right. We've still got houses so close to the canal it infringes on the aspect which will spoil it for the people already using the canal. And I can't make that strongly enough to you. It will, how can I say, destroy the feeling for those people walking on the canal.
I think what Councillor Parish is saying, it's going to change the aspect of the canal from a rural aspect or quasi-rural aspect to an urban aspect, because I must admit I get in that feel, because you walk along there now and it's rural, although you can see factories and things, but putting those there, it's now going to become very, very urban.
Yes, in this location, it's been accepted, from the outline stage that yes, it will change the rural element of the canal in this location. But the conservation officer, he is satisfied with this design approach to this part of the site, and it just relates. The remainder of the canal will retain its rural character. This is part of the development of the site and the principles established.
Okay, you happy with that? Understand that? I know it doesn't meet your requirements, Councillor Parish, but the Outline Planning Commission has actually dealt with that issue, and it would be very difficult to take a different track now. And if we did attempt to, then we may find ourselves having to face the planning inspector. So.
I accept that, but we shouldn't have accepted it in the first place. That's my point.
I don't disagree with you, but yeah, that's democracy for you. Are we ready now to determine this or not? Councillor Seaborn is stuck his hand up.
Would you like me to move the officer's recommendation subject to the conditions? Well, I would like to, yes, Chair. Put the mic on.
Sorry, I'm not mic'd. It's moved by Councillor Seaborn, seconded by Councillor Waite, that the officer's recommendation be approved, subject to the conditions. And are you ready to vote? All those in favour, please show. I'm abstaining. I'm using my privilege to abstain on this one. That's 6-4. Those against, please show. 6-2. That's carried by a majority of 6-2 with one abstention. Thank you very much. Welcome to stay, or welcome to go if you like. Oh, okay. All right, yeah. And this is you again, Helen. Stuart, has Jess just nipped out? Yeah, you don't have to say where. Okay. Okay, let's kick off. Please, Helen.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to the former Llantarnam Community Primary School in Oakfield. It's a full application for 78 dwellings. The application, as you're aware, the current primary school has actually been relocated to the newly constructed Llantarnam Community Primary School on the former Llantarnam Comprehensive School. this school has been vacant for some time, and this application is to redevelop it for residential. 78 dwellings are proposed. The access will be off Green Willow, leading into a loop road. There's a variety of properties ranging from 2, 3 and 4 bedroom dwellings. There'll be a significant area of open space proposed, which is where the play area will be located, and it's actually located adjacent to some existing open space off Croeswen, and gives good permeability and access to the shops. A link will also be retained onto Fontanham Road, a pedestrian link. So the only vehicle access is here at Green Willows. Here we have some street scenes of the house types. So they range in style, and materials are used to reflect the properties in the surrounding area. We did originally have some concerns about these properties here in terms of how they relate to the open space, because this is going to form quite an attractive area of open space. So we asked the applicant to have a look at how they treat these properties in terms of overlooking the open space and windows facing the properties. This here is actually fronting onto the open space, providing good surveillance. And then, unfortunately, we can't do a screen wall in this location, as we have got the tree root zone to protect. And also the side elevation has been amended to provide a more active elevation with windows. So this will be the elevations facing the open space. Here we have just more detailed drawing of the play area with good links to the existing and proposed residential properties on the site. The majority of the mature trees on the site will be retained as part of the development. Here we have some photographs. This is taken from Croeswen, looking at the existing school buildings, which are to be demolished. This is the existing vehicle access, but that will only be used for pedestrian access. Here we have the mature trees to be retained. These will be retained as well, together with those on the right. And here we have the relationship with the shops. Sorry, not quite dark there. This is the location of the existing pedestrian access to the school on Green Willow, and this is where the proposed access will be located. Oh, there you go. Thank you.
Thanks. Any questions, comments? A number of us went on the site visit fairly recently, so it's fairly strong in our minds, I would have thought. So does anybody want to move anything? Councillor Seaborn, but did you want to say anything, Councillor Taylor? One of you.
Application, Chair. Subject to all the recommendations.
Second that. Did I have my mic on?
I'll put my mic on now. Anyway, it's been moved and seconded by Councillor Seaborn and Councillor Taylor that the application be approved subject to the conditions contained therein. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah. It may feel as though we've finished, but we haven't. Cheers, Robin. Thanks very much. Yeah. I'll see you. I'll see you down Cardiff City, I suspect. Yeah. I was kidding. We're back to item 4, review of third party speaking rights, page 19. Now, this shouldn't trouble us for too long, I don't think, because there's been scrutiny on this and quite a bit of consultation, and the proposal really is to introduce on a trial basis a few measures which are enumerated on page 26. Oh, yes. Number 1 is the trial basis. The rest is not intended to be a trial basis. But the trial basis proposal is in respect of allowing people who are in favour of an application to speak, as well as those who are objecting to an application. So that those who think something is really good would be allowed to say so. But we'll see how that goes, or rather the committee would see how that goes. Anybody got any comments or questions? All those in favour then please show, and that is to approve the recommendation. I suppose I ought to have a proposer and seconder, so I'm proposing Councillor Ashley and Councillor Powell as proposer and seconder. Is that okay? Good. Do what you're told, that's it. Then we've got planning appeals, item 5, 6, 7 and 8, 2 of which were dismissed and 2 of which were allowed. Does anybody have any questions on any of those 4 items? That's the norm, that's the norm. But I give people an opportunity just to see where they are. Anybody got any comments on items 4 to 8, 5 to 8? It really will be 5 to 8 by the time we finish, if you do. No? Good. That's all noted. The next meeting of the Planning Committee will be determined by the new council in due course, which leads me very nicely to the point of actually thanking those members of this committee who, including myself, will not be returning to the council. Indeed, none of you might be returning to the council, but Pam Cameron and myself and Alan Furzer, Nigel Davis and Keith James and Phil, forgotten Phil, are all finishing. Yeah, I mentioned you, I think. So I'm sure, unless you want to say something for yourself, I'm sure everybody who is finishing, and indeed everybody who's a member, would wish to thank the officers here for their great help, professional support to us all. And it's actually, for me, been a pleasure. It's the best thing I've ever done, I think, being chair of planning committee, because I can tell you what to do and what not to do. I really enjoyed that. But no, seriously, the officers who have supported this committee over the last 2 or 3 years have been great as far as I'm concerned, and I would wish to thank all of you most sincerely, despite my background in planning, which tended to be in relation to the San Sebastopol original proposal, where we didn't always see eye to eye, but at least I understood why officers were proposing what they were proposing, and even I hope they understood why I was proposing what I was proposing. I still have great respect, really, for Duncan Smith and indeed the team that were in place at that time and are in place now. It's my last opportunity to speak in public about officers, and genuinely I do want to say what I've said very often in council, that I think we have excellent officers. Not so sure about the members, but excellent officers in the council. I've worked with a number like, the Chief Executive, of course, people like Nigel Aurelius, people who have gone in the past. He said, looking at his list, people like Mark Provis, who I worked very closely with when I was Cabinet Member for Education, and Sue Evans when she was Director of Social Services when I was Cabinet Member for Social Care. But also people like Dermot McChrystal, John Tushingham, Darren Joseph, Keith Rutherford, Neil Harris, everybody in member services, of course. The best member services people I've ever worked with. I haven't worked with many of them, of course, but they have been excellent. So, and I'm always sure you all feel the same, but if you want to say anything in particular, then please do.
Chair, and if I could just say that I've been on the planning committee, I think, since 2004. I did have a year off when I was the mayor, but then I did chair some rather big meetings as the mayor. But I would like to thank the planning committee for putting up with me at meetings and for helping me with all my ward work. They've been great. I'm not going to say that I'll miss you, but I may do. But I would like to thank you all. Anyway, that's all I want to say.
Yeah. I was going to thank you for your patience you've had with us throughout your time, because I know we can be very trying, that you've already pointed out. We can be so difficult, but I think you have been patient and fair. And I hope you have a long and wonderful retirement.
No, Brian. Look, it is one of the hardest committees to chair, and you are fair. You know, we do have our rows, but I will say you are fair and give everybody their chance to talk. And as far as all these officers here, because for the public out there, they think that we are in conclusions with these officers, and that's how planning does. But, you know, we argue, we debate, and at the end of the day, you are a fine bunch of people, and if I'm not back, I wish you all the best in the future.
Thank you. I feel like I've got to say something now because I won't be coming back. It has been a great committee to be on, because I think it's one where it's explained to you, and I hope that I usually get the gist of what's going on. We might disagree, that's democracy, but you know, it has been a very interesting committee to be on. You don't necessarily make friends. I've realised that, but you can't please everybody, so that's the way it is.
Thank you, Brian, for sharing. And even if I did mention canals, ancient woodlands, and I haven't mentioned allotments today, I could have done.
Thank you, Jess. Yeah, you'd spoiled a perfect day when allotments wasn't mentioned whilst in your company. But one officer I forgot to mention, that was Dave Congreve. Dave Congreve I work closely with, and I don't want to...
Could I just say, Brian, it's been a privilege working with you. You've been honest, straight, and very helpful many times, and all the officers, which we've worked with for a long time. But it's been a privilege to work with you all, and thank you for your friendship and for your support.